Hello! I'll be demonstrating how to set up the OBS-100C dual high-frequency generator and prepare for use. I'll be using the OBS-100C dual generator and introducing the detailed usage rule. We'll start by connecting the power cord and foot switch cable, both of these connected to the rear of the device. To connect the foot switch, align the small connector on the foot switch cable with the notch of 9 o'clock position. You'll also find the dial for adjusting the volume. To connect the monopolar handpiece, align the 3 pins on the handpiece cable connector with 3 holes in the receptacle and plugs firmly for a complete fit. To connect the bipolar forceps, insert the cable connector here and plugs firmly for a complete fit. To connect the disposable neutral electrode or reusable antenna pad, insert cable here and plugs firmly for a complete fit. Please note that the disposable neutral electrode or reusable antenna pad should be placed relatively close to the surgical site and must be close or adhered to the patient before the unit is turned on. Common locations are the upper or lower back, on the stomach, or on the patient's thigh. If the disposable neutral electrode or reusable antenna pad is not connected properly, a tone will sound and the indicator will illuminate red. Next, we'll be moving into inserting an electrode in the monopolar handpiece. Please note that most electrodes are expendable as well. Next, we'll learn how to set the appropriate energy output. This yellow section of control in this place is to known the cutting mode. Within this mode, there are 2 waveforms, cut and blend. These waveforms are selected by using Select button. Use this button to toggle back and forth between cut and blend. This yellow indicator light illuminates next to the selected waveforms. Once you select a waveform, you set the energy level using this button, the same at coag mode, which is to be controlled and displayed by blue section. With this blue select button, you can toggle between hemo, fulgurate, and bipolar waveforms, and their setting is displayed here. Hemo and fulgurate can be activated by hand switch or foot switch, but bipolar must be activated using the foot switch. Hand switch and foot switch mode can be toggled by pressing this button. Note, the generator won't be activated and will alarm by pressing hand switch when foot switch mode is selected. The yellow pedal indicates the waveform selected on the upper LED readout, and the right blue pedal activates the waveform selected on the lower LED readout. Remember, you can tell which waveform is selected by looking at the yellow and blue indicator light before using the generator. It's very important to determine a proper setting. It allows you to efficiently cutting the tissue without the electrode dragging or tissue sparking. The best way to do this is using a piece of beefsteak as a specimen. To familiarize yourself for this process, please get a piece of beefsteak and using your own generator. So let's begin by looking at the 2 problems we'll encounter if the settings are not right. Firstly, a dragging electrode indicates the power is too low. To experience tissue drag, lower the settings to a very low level of 3 watt and start to cut through the beefsteak. You'll feel tugging in point on the tissue and see tissue getting stuck to the wire electrode. The second problem is when the power is too high. This causes tissue sparking. To experience tissue sparking, raise the settings to a very high level of 50 watt and try to cut through the beefsteak. The electrode cut easily, but you'll see the tissue sparking. The ideal power settings are just above the tissue drag between 15 watt and 20 watt, so it requires the tissue smoothly with no sparking and no drag. Please understand that the dual RF electrosurgical generator does not use heat to cut, but generates a strong affinity with water molecules through ultra-high frequency RF energy. Because the target organ, tissue, or cell is rich in a large amount of water molecules, it is easy to absorb radio frequency energy. The expansion of water molecules causes an increase in intracellular pressure and cell division. With the cell division, the low temperature vapor generated by vaporization causes the surrounding tissue to solidify. The cutting process has only minimal damage to the surrounding tissue and can be cut through the clothes and used. There is no current flowing through the human body, and there is no electric burn accident like the traditional high-frequency generators. It is one of the safest electrosurgical equipment for doctors. Our product will give you varying amount of cutting and coagulating effects. I'm using the cut waveform here by pressing the distant yellow button, which allows you to make incision as easy as this. Notice how pink and raw the tissue remains on the inside. The dual RF generator produces much less thermal damage, so you don't get any of that charge or burn effect that you may get with traditional electrosurgical generators. There are two reasons for this. The first reason is the high frequency. This device operates at 4 MHz. This is 8 times higher than traditional electrosurgical devices, which run at approximately 0.5 MHz. Secondly, the wire is not relied on heat to cut. I can demonstrate this by activating the electrode and going directly from cutting tissue to touching plastic bag, and it will not melt or burn the plastic bag. The cut waveform is the most ideal for skin incision, with first intention healing is your primary concern. If you have a situation where you want to excise a lesion and suture the skin together, you should use the cut waveform, since the edge remains pink and viable. Another important use for the cut waveform is for taking biopsies where you want to clean specimen for pathology. I've now exchanged the straight cutting tip for a round loop electrode. With this electrode, I can gently sweep the tissue to excise of any intact specimen. Remember, it is important to activate the handpiece before making contact with the tissue. If you are not sending the specimen for analysis, then you may choose to use the blend setting. This is commonly used for things such as skin tags, papillomas, nevi, keratoses, and other non-suspicious cosmetic lesions. Select the blend mode and activate the blend waveform by pressing the yellow button on handpiece. The blend waveform is a combination of cutting and coagulation, which helps control bleeding while incising or excising tissue. Again, notice that underlined tissue is not burnt or charged, which is resulting excellent healing with minimal scarring. The hemo waveform is used for achieving hemostasis. Now we'll remove the loop electrode and replace with the ball electrode, the most commonly used devices for achieving hemostasis. Depress the blue button on the handpiece and lightly touch the bleeding area to seal off the small blood vessels. Notice how the tissue blenches as it is coagulating. This hemo waveform is also the setting you'll use to treat spider veins using the OBS fine micro insulated needles. The fourth settings on our unit is called fulgurate, and it's most similar to what you find in older devices known as hyfractors, where you intentionally throwing a spark to destroy the tissue. To access the fulgurate waveform, press the blue select button. The indicator light illuminates next to fulgurate. As you can see here, the difference is as it does blacking and tarn and burn the tissue, as it's supposed the other high-frequency waveforms, which preserve the surrounding tissue. The last modality of OBS dual RF unit is called bipolar. The frequency of the bipolar mode is 1.7 MHz, lower than the 4 MHz we discussed before. Lower frequency is better for straight coagulation, which is what the bipolar mode is used for. Use a bipolar forceps applies a very low energy setting because the current only has to travel one tip to the other. Thus, you really have to go about 3 watt to 5 watt on the bipolar setting. This allows you to grab individual bleeders and seal them off. Many users prefer this type of coagulation. It's gentle to the surrounding tissue. It is excellent to use bipolar for coagulation because you can go right through into the tissue and effectively seal off bleeders. This completes our setup and demonstration of OBS-100C dual RF generator.